Hello everybody, Jardis here, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you an updated Earth Attunement Elementalist build that is suited for the End of Dragons as well as Secrets of the Obscure expansion. Now this is basically an updated version of a previous Earth Elementalist build I did a while back, which I will link in the description below if you want to check that out. But anyway, this one is more suited for End of Dragons and Secrets of the Obscure, mainly because of all the changes that have been made to the game that involve the runes, relics, buffs, debuffs, removals, things of that nature. Things have been changed, so I figured it was time to dust off my Elementalist builds and give them a bit of a reworking and an upgraded version. And this one is for the Earth Attunement. Now, for those of you who have followed my channel and know, I have a hard time with playing elementals that rely solely on changing the attunements constantly, which is why I made a small series of elementalist builds that focused on one attunement only. Once again, this is for the Earth Attunement. Now, to show you how this build works, we are going to go into the gear, and the gear is Dire sets, which is toughness, vitality, and condition damage. We will be using Superior Rune of the Krait. However, as of this recording, Superior Rune of the Krait is a bit pricey in the gem store, so please be aware of that. We will be using for our weapon sets, we will be using a Scepter, which is also Dire set. And we will also be using a Dire Dagger in the second hand. And we have a main second set of Dagger, again, Dire set in the second set. The sigils, we will be using a Sigil of Agony and Sigil of Bursting, as well as Agony in the second set Dagger in case we want to do. The reason why we set it this way is because the Scepter provides a little bit of a ranged attack, which is what we're going to want to do in the primary build. Although if you want to get up close and personal, you can switch to double daggers and do things that way. The primary win condition for this build is mostly be dealing bleeding damage, but we will be dealing other forms of condition damages as well, but our main focus will be bleeding. For the trinkets, we are actually using Trailblazer set, which is toughness, vitality, condition damage, and expertise, mainly because we want to get a little bit of extra oomph out of our conditions that we will be using. For the relic, we will be using Relic of the Fractal. When you inflict bleeding on an enemy with 6 or more stacks of bleeding, which we will easily do, also inflict burning and torment. This is the other condition damages I was referring to earlier. Now, as for the build itself, we will be going Earth, Arcane, and Tempest. For Earth, we are taking Serrated Stones, mainly because bleeding you inflict has increased duration and deal increased damage to bleeding foes. As I said, bleeding will be our primary condition, so this is a must. We will be taking Strength of Stone. Gain condition damage based on your toughness. Inflict bleeding when you immobilize a foe. Now, our toughness will be pretty high considering the fact that we are using Dire and Trailblazer sets. As you can see, our toughness is already at 2018. So, that means a lot. Plus, it also says we will inflict bleeding when we immobilize a foe. We will have a skill that will allow us to immobilize foes when we need to. And then finally, we're taking Written in Stone. Signets continue to grant their passive bonuses while charging. Gain an aura when you use a Signet skill. Since we will be staying in the Earth Attunement, the one we will be getting is the Magnetic Aura. Reflects projectiles with magnetic energy. Basically what that means is if you're using your Signets and somebody shoots at you, that projectile will bounce away. Now for the Arcane, we are taking Arcane Perception, or Precession. I do apologize. Your critical strikes have a chance to inflict a condition based on your attunement. Well, we're staying on Earth and we want the bleeding, which is what this will do. We will be taking Arcane Resurrection. Cast Geyser when you begin reviving a downed ally. Geysers now partially revive downed allies. When you begin reviving an ally, you gain an aura based on your attunement. Well, we will be getting Magnetic Aura, which will reflect projectiles away. Now, the reason why we have picked this one is mainly as a support trait, because the other two traits in this line really do not have much effect for the for this build itself, so feel free to go ahead and use one of these other ones. But I prefer to keep on this one in case I come across a player that has gone down while trying to handle a hero point, for example, and they need to get back up. So that's why I take this one. Though you are free to take either of these other twos if you choose. And finally, for the last one, we are taking Evasive Arcana. Cast a skill when you dodge based on your attunement. And since we're staying on Earth, we will be getting the Shockwave, which creates a shockwave that bleeds and cripples nearby foes, as you can see. Then finally, we're taking Tempest. Unstable Conduit. Grant an aura based on your attunement when you use an overload. Well, once again, we're using Earth. We will be getting the magnetic aura to reflect away projectiles. We will also be using Harmonious Conduit. Gain stability and swiftness when starting an overload. This one we use mainly because since we will be using our overloads, we don't want to get knocked down or knocked back and therefore interrupted while we're casting that, because our overloads are going to become very important. Now, we could also take the Invigorating Torrents, auras you also grant regeneration and vigor for a more survivable trait, because the overload grants an aura which would trigger this as well to give you an extra buff for your endurance as well as healing. But overall, I would prefer to stick with the swiftness and stability myself, but you are free to choose. And finally, the last one, we will be taking Lucid Singularity. Apply boons to nearby allies while channeling overloads and when successfully completing an overload channel. Basically, when we use an overload with this trait, we will be granting alacrity to ourselves as well as any other players that are nearby. Now, we could also use Transcendent Tempest, which would basically make our overloads cooldown time reduced, and it would give us increased damage once it's complete. Or we could do the Elemental Bastion, which heals allies we granted aura to, which, again, the Unstable Conduit gives us that aura when we use our overload. Grant Frost aura to nearby allies when struck while below the health threshold. Again, these two are more situational, and you're, again, free to choose whichever one you want, but I would prefer the Lucid Singularity for the extra alacrity. Now, to show you how this build works, I am currently near the village waypoint in Setung Province, which is part of the End of Dragons expansion, and I am actually going to go up here to this hero point and show you how this build works. Now, the hero point itself does not trigger an enemy, it's actually just guarded by an elite, and there have been times where the elite tends to be a daily for the Wizard's Vault completions. So, today just happens to not be one of those days, but I'm going to go up there anyway to kind of show you how this build works. Now, there is no real set rotation to this, but I do strongly... Oh, before I forget, I'm sorry, I completely neglected this. Stupid me. Let me get back into the build. For the skills, we will be using Glyph of Elemental Harmony to heal ourselves and gain a boon based on our attunement, which will grant us protection. We will be using Signet of Earth to improve our toughness, and thereby granting us even more condition damage by Strength of Stone. This is also the skill we will be using in order to immobilize and bleed our foe, which also gives us even additional bleeding with Strength of Stone. We will be using Glyph of Storms to create a storm based on our attunement, which for us would be Sandstorm. And we will be taking Glyph of Lesser Elementals and Glyph of Elementals to supplement our damage output. Now, this build does not power through enemies. It does not, like, one-shot kill them. This is more of a condition build, so it will take time to kill your enemies, which is why we need the extra protection with our elementalists, or, excuse me, our elementals. Anyway, we're going to go after this elite, and again, we don't have much of a rotation other than starting with our elementals, and then I'm going to hit overload to make sure that our enemies get hit. Followed by 5-4, sandstorm, bleed and immobilize, and then pretty much use whatever skills you have available off cooldown. And don't forget, when you dodge, you can also deal even more bleeding effects as well. Now, as you can see, we got his bleeding up to 33 at the moment. But it will go down, but we can get it back up, so. And as I said, this is not going to be a fast fight with this character. It's more about survivability and outlasting your opponents. And that is how this build works. I hope you enjoy. Feel free to share this information with anybody else who wants to build a Earth-only Elementalist. And I will see you again in the next video. Happy gaming!